Friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll dive into the epic story of the most powerful battleship ever built, Yamato, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring history to life. The birth of a giant. The story of Yamato begins in the late 1930s, when Japan sought to dominate the Pacific with ships unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Washington and London naval treaties had placed limits on battleship size, but Japan secretly broke away from those restrictions. In Kure Naval Arsenal, hidden from foreign eyes, engineers constructed a ship so massive that its scale was almost unimaginable, over 260 meters long, with a displacement of 72,000 tons at full load. Unmatched firepower. What made Yamato legendary were its guns, 9 18.1-inch, 460 mm main cannons, the largest ever mounted on a warship. Each shell weighed as much as a small car and could smash through any armor in existence. The ship also bristled with secondary batteries and anti-aircraft weapons, making her a floating fortress. At full strength, Yamato carried a crew of more than 3,000 men. The captain and the mission. Throughout her service, Yamato had several captains, but one of the most notable was Captain Chiaki Matsuda, who commanded her on her final mission. From the very beginning, the ship's purpose was clear: to be the decisive weapon in Japan's grand strategy. The Imperial Navy believed Yamato and her sister ship Musashi would lead the fleet in a climactic battle, destroying the U.S. Pacific Fleet and securing Japan's dominance. The reality of war. But the war did not unfold as Japan had planned. By 1942-43, aircraft carriers, not battleships, had become the true rulers of the sea. Yamato, despite her immense power, spent much of her career anchored in port, serving more as a symbol than a weapon. She participated in the Battle of Leyte Gulf in 1944, unleashing her giant guns, but even there she was overshadowed by air power. Her sister ship Musashi was sunk in that same battle by waves of American aircraft. Operation Tengo, the final voyage. By April 1945, Japan was desperate. With the Allies closing in on Okinawa, the Imperial Navy ordered Yamato on a one-way mission, Operation Tengo. The plan was for her to sail with a light escort, beach herself on Okinawa, and fight as a stationary fortress until destroyed. It was, in essence, a suicide mission for both the ship and her crew. Captain Matsuda and his men knew the odds, but they accepted their fate as part of Japan's last stand. The death of Yamato. On April 7, 1945, Yamato set out with a small task force, but U.S. reconnaissance aircraft spotted her almost immediately. Waves of American bombers and torpedo planes descended upon the battleship. Despite her heavy anti-aircraft fire, the sky was filled with swarms of Hellcats, Helldivers, and Avengers. Torpedoes ripped into her hull, bombs exploded across her decks. After hours of relentless attacks, explosions reached her magazines. A cataclysmic blast tore through the ship, sending a fireball thousands of meters into the sky. Witnesses said the shockwave could be felt miles away. At 2:23 p.m., the world's largest battleship rolled and sank, taking more than 3,000 sailors with her. Fewer than 300 survived. Legacy of Yamato. The sinking of Yamato was more than just the destruction of a warship, it symbolized the end of the battleship era. No matter how powerful, a giant of steel could not survive in the age of aircraft carriers. Yet, the legend of Yamato endures. To this day, she remains a symbol of Japan's ambition, pride, and sacrifice. Her wreck lies in the East China Sea, broken but not forgotten, a silent monument to the men who served aboard her. The story of Yamato is both tragic and fascinating, born to dominate the seas, but doomed by the tides of history. Chapter 1: Building the Beast. In 1937, when the world was still distracted by Europe's rising tensions, Japan laid down a secret project. At the Kure Naval Arsenal, engineers constructed the largest battleship ever conceived, under conditions of absolute secrecy. Workers lived on site, sworn to silence. To shield its massive hull from American spies, giant bamboo screens were built around the dockyard. The ship that emerged was unlike anything ever seen, Yamato, with guns so large they dwarfed anything afloat. At launch in 1940, she embodied Japan's belief that quality could defeat quantity, one battleship that could outfight any 2 or 3 enemies. Chapter 2: A Floating Fortress. Yamato was a marvel, but she was also a gamble. Her 18.1-inch guns fired shells that weighed 1.5 tons each and could reach targets over 25 miles away. Her armor was designed to withstand anything short of her own guns. Yet her size came at a cost. She was slow to maneuver and consumed staggering amounts of fuel. By the time she entered service in 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor had already shown the world that carriers, not battleships, would dominate the seas. Still, the Japanese High Command clung to the dream of a decisive surface battle where Yamato would prove her worth. Chapter 3: The Turning Tide. For most of her career, Yamato spent long months anchored at Truk and later in Japan's inland sea, awaiting the decisive battle that never came. She first saw action at the Battle of Midway in 1942, but only as distant support. It wasn't until October 1944 at the Battle of Leyte Gulf that her great guns finally thundered in combat. There, Yamato engaged U.S. forces, firing on escort carriers and destroyers in the chaotic battle off Samar. Despite her immense firepower, she failed to turn the tide, and her sister ship Musashi was sunk after enduring more than 20 torpedo and bomb hits. The writing was on the wall: air power ruled the ocean. Chapter 4: The Final Mission. By April 1945, Japan was cornered. American forces were closing in on Okinawa, just 350 miles from the home islands. Desperation bred Operation Tango, a plan as bold as it was suicidal. Yamato would steam toward Okinawa with minimal escort, beach herself, and fight as a fortress until destroyed. Captain Chiaki Matsuda and his crew of over 3,000 knew the truth: it was a one-way voyage. When the order was given, some sailors wept, others bowed silently, but all accepted their fate. Chapter 5: The End of the Giant. On April 7, 1945, American scout planes spotted Yamato as she cut through the East China Sea. Within hours, more than 300 aircraft swarmed her formation. Dive bombers rained destruction from above, torpedo planes circled low to strike her vulnerable sides. Anti-aircraft fire roared, downing some attackers, but the sky was too thick with planes. Torpedo after torpedo tore open her hull. Fires raged across her decks. At 2:23 p.m., a massive explosion from her forward magazine sent a mushroom cloud towering into the sky, visible for miles. When the smoke cleared, Yamato was gone. Chapter 6: Legacy. Of the 3,300 men aboard, fewer than 300 survived. For Japan, the loss was catastrophic, but by then the war was already lost. The death of Yamato symbolized the end of the battleship era. No ship, however mighty, could withstand waves of carrier-based aircraft. Today, her wreck lies silent beneath the East China Sea, her broken frame a reminder of ambition, sacrifice, and the unstoppable tide of history. The Yamato was born as a weapon of victory, but died as a monument of futility. Yet she remains a legend, the greatest battleship ever built, whose story is as much about human pride as it is about war. The story of Yamato begins in the late 1930s, when Japan, determined to secure dominance in the Pacific, secretly broke free from naval treaties and laid down a ship so massive it would dwarf anything afloat. At the Kure Naval Arsenal, under bamboo screens built to block foreign eyes, engineers assembled the largest battleship ever built. When she was launched in 1940, Yamato stood as the pride of the Imperial Navy, over 260 meters long, displacing more than 70,000 tons, armed with the heaviest naval guns in history, 9 18.1-inch monsters capable of hurling shells the size of small cars across 25 miles. Her armor was designed to withstand anything short of her own weapons. To the Japanese, she was unsinkable, a floating fortress that would deliver the decisive battle they believed would secure their empire. Yet fate had already moved on. The war that unfolded was not one of battleship duels, but of aircraft carriers and submarines, of long-range strikes and air power. For much of her career, Yamato sat idle in Truk Lagoon and the inland sea, more a symbol of might than a weapon of war. She finally fired her guns in anger during the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, where her thunderous salvos rained down on U.S. escort carriers and destroyers off Samar, but even then her presence could not change the tide. Her sister ship Musashi was sunk in that same battle, pummeled by dozens of bomb and torpedo hits until the sea swallowed her whole. The dream of the decisive battle had slipped away. By April 1945, Japan was cornered. American forces were storming Okinawa, and in desperation the High Command ordered Yamato on a one-way mission, Operation Tengo. With little escort and barely enough fuel for the journey, she was to sail south, beach herself on Okinawa, and fight as a stationary fortress until destroyed. Captain Chiaki Matsuda and his crew of more than 3,000 men knew the truth: they were sailing to their deaths. On April 7, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft spotted the formation. Within hours, swarms of carrier planes descended, more than 300 strong. The sky roared with the scream of dive bombers and the growl of torpedo planes. Yamato's anti-aircraft guns spat fire, cutting some from the sky, but the waves were relentless. Torpedoes slammed into her hull, one after another, tearing open compartments, flooding engines, and setting the giant ablaze. Bombs rained down, detonating across her decks, killing men where they stood. The pride of Japan staggered, her great guns silent as she listed heavily to port. At 2:23 p.m., fire reached her magazines. A cataclysmic explosion tore through the ship, blasting a column of flame and smoke thousands of feet into the air, seen from miles away. When the smoke cleared, Yamato was gone, taking over 3,000 souls with her. Fewer than 300 survived. Her wreck now lies in the East China Sea, shattered and silent, a tomb for the men who sailed her. The death of Yamato marked not only the end of the greatest battleship ever built but also the end of the battleship era itself. No matter how mighty, no colossus of steel could stand against the age of air power. Yet her legend endures as a symbol of ambition and sacrifice, of pride and tragedy, and as a reminder that even the greatest creations of man are subject to the tide of history. In the decades after her destruction, Yamato transformed from a weapon of war into a cultural icon. For Japan, she became a symbol not only of lost power but also of sacrifice, embodying the devotion of thousands of sailors who sailed knowing they would never return. Survivors spoke of the final day with haunting clarity: the thunder of bombs, the shuddering of the hull, the desperate fight to keep her afloat even as the sea poured in. Some described the moment of the final explosion as if the world itself split open, a roar so loud it seemed to tear the sky. For historians, Yamato stands as both marvel and warning. Her construction pushed naval engineering to its limits, a testament to human ambition. Yet her fate proved that brute strength and firepower could not withstand the new reality of warfare. She fired her great guns only a handful of times in combat, while carriers and aircraft decided the outcome of the Pacific War. Her wreck was discovered in 1985, lying in two massive sections over 1,000 feet deep in the East China Sea. Explorers who visited described the eerie sight of the broken hulk, gun turrets torn free, steel twisted by the force of the final blast. Coral and fish now claim the remains, nature slowly turning the most powerful battleship in history into part of the ocean floor. And yet, her story endures in memory, in books, films, and even in art and popular culture. To this day, Yamato represents both the heights of naval power and the futility of clinging to outdated visions of war. She was built to dominate, to inspire fear and respect, but in the end, she became a tragic reminder that even giants can fall. The tale of Yamato is not just about steel and guns, it is about pride, sacrifice, and the unrelenting march of history. The legend of Yamato only grew stronger as time passed. In Japan, her name became synonymous with national spirit, appearing in poems, films, and even in the title of the beloved anime space battleship Yamato, where she was reborn as a vessel carrying humanity's last hope. For many, this was more than fiction, it was a way of giving the ship and her crew a second life, transforming tragedy into inspiration. Naval architects around the world continued to study her design. Her main battery of 18.1-inch guns remains the largest ever mounted on a warship, and her armor belt was so thick that it challenged even modern explosives. But these technical marvels could not change the truth her story revealed: technology without strategy is doomed. By the time she entered service, aircraft carriers had already made ships like Yamato obsolete, a fact driven home by her fiery end. Among sailors, her memory carries a quiet respect. American pilots who attacked her later admitted awe at her size and resilience, noting how she endured dozens of torpedo and bomb hits before finally succumbing. Japanese survivors remembered her not just as a ship, but as a floating world, a community of thousands bound together by duty and fate. Today, her resting place is treated like a shrine. Flowers are cast upon the waves above her wreck, and memorials in Kure keep alive the memory of the men who never returned. Visitors walk the halls of the Yamato Museum, standing before a massive scale model that shows the ship in her full glory, imagining the pride and the terror she inspired. In every telling, Yamato remains more than a warship. She is a symbol of ambition beyond reason, of sacrifice beyond measure, and of the harsh lesson that even the greatest giants of steel cannot escape the tide of change. And so the story of Yamato closes not in victory, but in memory. She was born in secrecy, built to embody invincibility, and sent to sea with the hope of turning the tide of war. Instead, she spent much of her life waiting, a silent giant overshadowed by carriers and aircraft, before being sent on a final voyage that was less a mission than a sacrifice. When she sank in April 1945, she carried with her not only more than 3,000 men but also the last dream of battleship supremacy. Yet her end did not erase her legend. The mushroom cloud of her final explosion marked both the death of the world's largest battleship and the death of an era. In its place arose a new vision of naval warfare, one in which the unseen aircraft, submarines, missiles would rule the seas. Still, Yamato's shadow stretches across history. Her name is spoken with reverence in Japan, her story studied in every naval academy, her wreck a tomb where steel and silence keep vigil together. For those who look upon her legacy, she is more than just a warship. She is pride in tragedy, ambition and futility, sacrifice and inevitability. She reminds us that even the greatest creations of man, no matter how powerful, are subject to time, to change, and to the tides of history. Yamato rose as the mightiest battleship ever built and fell as the last of her kind. But her story endures, eternal, a legend carried by the waves. Even today, when the name Yamato is spoken, it carries a weight unlike any other warship. She is remembered not just for her size or her guns, but for what she represented, the belief that a single giant could decide the fate of nations. Her very existence was both a triumph of engineering and a reflection of Japan's desperate gamble to hold back the tide of war. The echoes of her final battle are still felt. Every anniversary of her sinking, ceremonies are held in Japan, honoring the thousands who went down with her. Survivors, now few and old, share their memories of comrades who never returned, of the deafening roar of bombs and the blinding flash of the final explosion. For them, Yamato is not myth, but memory, a floating world where they lived, fought, and lost so much. Writers and historians continue to retell her tale, because it is more than just military history. It is the story of human ambition pushed to its extreme. Of the clash between old visions and new realities, of sacrifice made in the face of certain doom. The ocean still guards her broken hull, but above the waves, her name has become immortal. Yamato remains a legend, not because she won great victories, but because of the sheer scale of her tragedy. She rose as the mightiest battleship ever to sail and fell as the symbol of an age that could not survive the future. And so the saga of Yamato ends not with triumph but with legacy. Conceived in secrecy, launched as the mightiest warship the world had ever seen, and destroyed in a storm of fire and steel, she remains one of history's most haunting symbols. Her fall marked the end of the battleship era, yet her name endures as both pride and warning, a reminder that no power is absolute, no giant invincible, and that even the strongest creations of man must bow to the tide of change. The wreck of Yamato lies silent in the deep, but her spirit sails forever in legend.